Geoff Morris could come forward. Geoff has had the honor to be involved in a Medal of Honor ceremony in Washington, D.C. this past week. And we'd appreciate it if Geoff could give us a short description of what transpired and how it affected him. I'm sure it was very, very dramatic for Geoff.
So here's what happened in a nutshell. When I was a young guy in 1970, I flew with a Hawaiian kid. He was 3 years younger than I am. His name was Dennis Fuji. He quit 10th grade. He came from I don't want to use the word sordid, but complicated background. And he joined the Army to get away from his home. And he was a crew chief on medevac helicopters up on the DMZ. And he and I flew together constantly. As it was his helicopter, but I was the medic, but the crew chief was assigned a helicopter, and the pilots were kind of guests on his helicopter. He was the mechanic and made sure everything was running okay. And I was, quote, his medic. So Dennis and I flew together for 6 or 7 months. And then an event took place shortly after I left Vietnam, literally 12 hours after I left, where he got shot down in Laos. And I was supposed to be on that helicopter, but for the fact that I was past for the people in the military, they didn't know what this would mean, my ETS date. So I was past my ETS date, still flying, and they came and grabbed me and pulled me off the helicopter and said, "You're on the way home right now." So another medic replaced me, and then that medic was with Dennis when he got shot down. And the event for which Dennis got shot down last week, it has been 4 or 5 days ago, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. It took 52 years. And he was among one of 4 or 5 people who were awarded the Medal of Honor. I think it was Wednesday of last week. The date isn't really important. So Ann and I traveled to the White House. Dennis asked me to come up and be one of his guests, actually his only guest. And we were ushered into this room at the White House. We had to go through security clearance and security clearance. The security was so, I don't know what the word would be, the adjective, but it was so stringent that once we got on the bus to go to the White House, if there were like 50 people on the bus, the guy said, if you have to go to the bathroom, you have to go on the bus. You cannot get off the bus now. So then we go to the White House, and we go through clickers after clickers and security, and it took 20 minutes to go through securities. I use the word plural because it was a myriad of security. So we get to this room, and it was I don't know what the room is. I guess it'd be the presidential briefing room, but there were about 80 people or 100 people roughly, and all the Medal of Honor recipients. And you don't call them winners because they made that clear. You're not winning anything. You don't win the lottery. You receive this award. And each of the men were just stellar people. I can't tell you how impressed I was with their just humanity. And 3 of them were Hawaiians or a Cherokee Indian. Birdwell, he was a Cherokee Indian from a little town of about 2,500 people in northeast Oklahoma. Young guy, all these guys, I'm passing this, I don't know where it is right now, you can see this, but it kind of summarizes what each one of these people did. But they all deserve the award. And they were just plain as salt. You could talk to them. It wasn't like there was any puffery. It was just, Birdwell was a grunt, an infantry guy at E4, E5, and he just was at the wrong place at the wrong time and did this heroic act. He came back and He was only 20 when he came back. And then he was honored by the Cherokee tribe, but kind of ignored otherwise. And then he went to law school, came back, went to the University of Oklahoma Law School, came back, and has practiced law in this little town, for the name I don't remember, but stupid me, my son owned a company for a while called Birdwell. Get the gist here, Birdwell. Well, I wore this t-shirt that big sign said Birdwell on the back, and I'm walking around in the hotel, and Birdwell's family is coming up to me and say, who are you? And I said, well, I'm Geoff Morris. Why you got that t-shirt on? I said, hey, I'm sorry. So I wore another t-shirt the next day, and they bought me a drink. Another guy, Duffy. Duffy was I can show you a picture in a minute, but he looked like a third world dictator. He had all these medals on that hang down like this. I mean, but the guy did amazing things. He was just an amazing guy, and he was an enlisted guy, and then did 7 or 8 years as an enlisted guy, and then got a commission and was an officer and retired as a major. You think, well, kind of a pompous guy. Well, he's not. He started writing poetry, and one of his poems got nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. So there you go. You never know what people have for a talent until you sit down and talk to them for a while. Another guy, who the heck, I can't remember all of them. Keneshiro. I met his family. Keneshiro was another Hawaiian. The event he got the Medal of Honor for was in 1966, or 67, like the dates were a little confusing, but then he got killed a month later in another event. So his award was awarded posthumously. But I could go on and talk to you for hours about the experience. It was just, if you were there, you just soak it all in and you realize all the stuff about war, it had nothing to do with military exploits. It had to do with normal men being at the wrong places, I call it, at the wrong time, and being acknowledged for it 50 some years later. And Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley, the chief of staff, acknowledged that in their speeches, saying that minorities, specifically Hawaiian Islanders of Japanese descent, and Dennis is half Hawaiian and half Japanese, and the First Nation people, Cherokees, Birdwell, and other minorities, including blacks, were marginalized in the military. And as anybody who's been in that situation would know, you would know that the officers get the medals for being in a command and control ship at 2,000 feet directing, and the guy on the ground is doing all the grunt work. They don't know who he is, and he just goes home that night or sleeps in a tent. So it was really a remarkable experience. And it's kind of, Dennis was always afraid of officers. As you just, Morris, you can't talk to those people. You can't talk to those people. This is how he was when he was young. I said, hell, Dennis, I'm a draftee. I'm just here for a short time. I don't care. He said, no, stay away from those guys. They'll just cause trouble. Well, tables are turned 52 years later. All the 4-star generals, and there was like 12 4-star generals, some 3-star, so it'd be like 11 and 3 or something. You do the numbers, I don't know, but we're coming up and saying, Dennis, I'm Mark Milley. And Dennis, well, Dennis is compromised. I'll show you a couple of pictures, but he goes, hey, hi you. He goes, fine. And then it kept happening. Lloyd Austin came up and introduced himself. Mark Milley came up and introduced himself to me. He says, I'm Mark Milley. And I said, Mark, I know who you are. But they're all like that. There was no general came up. This is the tenor of the event. No general one came up and said, I'm General so-and-so. They all introduced themselves by their first name. So it was just a really remarkable time, and it was a wonderful experience. And then the second day, that was the first day when President Biden, this was in the White House. The second day, these men were inducted into what they call, I think it's the Hall of Heroes.
Yes.
Over at a base that includes near the Pentagon, but they had this, you can watch it if you go to YouTube and do type in 2022 Hall of Heroes, it's worth watching because these men and their families give speeches. And they're not long, they're only like 4 or 5 minutes. And they talk about the event and how just what it meant to them, and nobody was looking for praise. They just talked like, you know, I'm just a soldier. I did what I had to do at the time, and I don't feel comfortable being called a hero, and I'm happy to be alive, and I'm happy to be able to have come back home and raise a family and have children and have a normal life. So it was just wonderful. And I'm going to share with you the letter I wrote on behalf of Dennis 20 years ago, because we knew for Dennis it was going to be an uphill battle. He received the Silver Star for the event, and comments were made, not to me, because I was out of the Army. I was only in the Army 19 months. But some other guys in my unit who stayed in the Army were contacted, one of them being a gentleman by the name of Steve Woods, who ironically, you know what happened to these guys? Steve Woods became the number 2 man in Amway, go figure. But you tell what happened to people. But anyhow, Steve got into it with a general who somehow, Steve had written a letter, they heard about Steve, and he got talking to this general, and the man had made some derogatory comment about ethnicity of the recipient. And Steve said, "You do not want to tangle with me. I was there with that man that day, and I've given money to a lot of congressmen. If you want to get into a fight with me, you're picking the wrong guy." And the general said, "Are you threatening me?" He says, "No, I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you what I am going to do." It was that simple. So here's the letter I wrote on behalf of Dennis. This was dated October 29th, 2003. The Honorable Senator Daniel Inouye, who was, you remember that he was a senator from Hawaii back then, who, by the way, was also, had received, I think he received the Medal of Honor too. His arm was shattered in an event. You remember, for those guys who are over 65 or 70, you might remember. Dear Senator Inouye, I've been advised that Dennis Mark Fujii is being considered for the Congressional Medal of Honor, and I have been requested to write to you concerning his past experiences with me in Vietnam. From October 70 through February 15th of 1971, I was paired with Dennis on a regular basis as a DMZ dust-off medic, which operated out of Quang Tri, Vietnam, approximately 10 miles from the DMZ. Our area of operations necessitated occasional trips in North Vietnam and Laos to recover downed pilots. It is ironic that I was supposed to have been the medic with Dennis on the day his crew was shot down over Laos in early February 1971, and it was due to a last-minute crew switch that resulted in my being replaced by another medic. I am certain that your research would indicate that our unit had extremely high casualty rates, and although I don't remember the exact number, I know that well over half of our unit of approximately 32 pilots, crew chiefs, and medics were killed over the course of 14 months, with another 6 or 7 going home early due to wounds received in action. In all candor, I was truly blessed by virtue of the fact that I did not receive a scratch while in country. However, I'm also mindful of the fact that I would not be here today if it wasn't for Dennis's quick response to an emergency situation that occurred during a hoist mission approximately 2 or 3 days before the event, for which he has received so much recognition. Although the dates are a little fuzzy, I can recall that during the first week of February in 1971, most of our missions were hot. But I mean hot to you would mean enemy fire. I can recall the first week of February, most of the missions were hot, and any venture into a landing zone was greeted with small arms fire, mortars, or recoilless rifle fire. One particular event stands out in my mind as our crew was returning from a hot mission only to receive an urgent Mayday call from a pile of a helicopter that had been brought down by enemy fire a few minutes before. They were in real panic and the bad guys had surrounded their aircraft. Although a helicopter was very low on fuel, the aircraft commander made a decision to attempt to extract these two men with a hoist. I remember standing on the skid while we were taking intermittent small arms fire from a considerable distance. We were able to retrieve the two pilots on a hoist when all of a sudden the hoist malfunctioned and started slipping in a downward position with the prongs open. This had never happened to me in my 14 months, and I pushed the emergency switch, which, as you know, was supposed to fire a .45 caliber bullet, severing the cable. That too malfunctioned, so I was forced to attempt to pull the cable up from a distance of about 30 feet, hand over hand, with the attachment still attached. At the same time, the pilot banked the aircraft, stating he could no longer wait because we were dangerously low on fuel. I don't remember exactly what happened next, other than for some reason the loose cable started unwinding and I was pulled out of the aircraft, hanging in the skid with the cable wrapped around my right foot. Dennis somehow managed to reach down and grab my clothing and hold me by the neck while I attempted to secure myself on the skid. We landed a short distance away, and I cannot recall if we boarded another aircraft or managed to refuel by some other means. I only know that I was surely saved from a 150-foot free fall by Dennis. Simply stated, because of Dennis's quick actions, I have been given 33 additional years in which to marry a lovely lady and raise 4 children. It is ironic he was shot down 72 hours later and never had the chance to say goodbye. Although I wasn't with Dennis on the ground over there in Laos during that trying period, I'm quite certain that his actions would have made any mother proud to have him and her son. I was honored to have Dennis as a friend and a crew chief. That was my experience with Dennis. So now, I'm just gonna, if I may, so I can see this, I'll step over here and just show you these regular guys. Obviously that's Dennis and I. That's my Birdwell t-shirt. That's Dennis then, now. And then the next slide is Dennis getting the medal from President Biden. And that was what Dennis looked like when he was a kid. Like that's what 52 years will do to you. He has diabetes now, and he has a number of other medical issues, and he's quite feeble. Now this is, may I step over here?
Sure.
This is, this young man here, he's not young, he's probably 50, but his uncle or dad, I can't remember now, I'm embarrassed. No, dad, uncle, received the medal, but he passed away, so he is receiving it for him. This man, I can't remember who he is either, I'm sorry. This happened so fast, but he received the medal not on the day that we did. He's a prior recipient, and he showed up for the event. This is Dennis. This is the guy who looks like the third world dictator, Senator Major Duffy. Guy only weighs probably 130 pounds. He was actually stooped. The damn medals must have weighed 22 pounds, but he was hanging in there. And this next man is Jim McLaughlin. Jim was a medic. He received it earlier too. He received it 2 years ago. You may recall they talked about a medic from Michigan who was delayed award. Well, he went on to coach about high school. That's all I wanted to do was coach high school. And he tells a story about how when he went up for wrestling at Olivet College in Michigan, it's a Division III school, they recruited him to go wrestling after he got there. It wasn't like a scholarship guy. And he walked in and he said, "Where's all the ropes?" And they said, "What the hell are you talking about?" He said, "You know, the ropes like for wrestling." He says, "We don't wrestle that way. That's professional wrestling." He said he was all disappointed because he couldn't bounce off the ropes. But he coached 10 or 11 state champion baseball teams in Michigan. He's just a wonderful guy. And the guy next to him is Birdwell. It's not a very good picture. We'll show it in a minute, but that's Birdwell, the Cherokee Indian. Actually, we shouldn't use the word Indian anymore, First Nation, but that's the gang together. And this is excuse me for a minute. I was a little taken aback by this. This is sexist, but this is Christine Wormuth. Now, I thought she was somebody's wife, but she's a Secretary of the Army. Hey, just shoot me, okay? I'm just telling you what because she walked up with another man, but she's a Secretary of the Army. And there's Dennis, there's Mark Milley, and I forget this gentleman's name. He's another 4-star general, but that's when he was getting the award the next day that goes in the Hall of Heroes. And next one, that's Dennis and me and his brother. There was no spending time on that one. I only picked out 10 quick. Here's Mark Milley, who was just before had been chatting with Dennis on his knee, but stood up for a minute. And this guy over here, with the wife who looks like a model, he got the medal for, oh, guess what? What? Anybody here going to guess what his name is? Thomas Paine. Scout's honor. His name is Thomas Paine. He has this little kid here who's good looking, a good looking wife, and he's good looking. So there you are. I think he got out of the Army, and he's in college now. And go ahead, next one. Oh, that's it. These are guys I flew with who came up for the event. I won't go through who they are, what they're doing. But they're just a picture with Dennis. We all look old now, I know, so don't worry about it. You don't have to say it. And there's a general who wanted to have his picture taken with Dennis. I don't remember who he was. He was a 3-star. Dennis smiled. It's hard to get Dennis to smile, but he'd smile for that one. And then who else?
I think that's it.
That it? That just gives a little flavor for us. So that's it in a nutshell. It was just a wonderful time. And I'm passed around, it's over by Dennis right now, but that tells you what each guy did if you want to see the program. But they were all, to me, they're just my heroes. So, okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it very much. And I'm sure that was a very moving ceremony, and those guys deserve it. It's a shame it's been so many years before they were honored like they deserved. So before we call an end to the meeting, I would like to announce that if you haven't, make sure you subscribe to Common Sense News. We're trying some new techniques with that to make it better and more effective and quicker for you to get through the information. And just like Anna Escamani said at her talk, we're trying to do this to empower ourselves so we can make a change in this next election. So volunteer, work with us, and we'll get the job done. And with that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much. Good night.